and welcome back to another episode of the Stripped Whole podcast, where we challenge our faith and our perspectives, and we find hope and encouragement in whatever season we find ourselves in. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's jump right in. Hello, welcome back. Simcha here with another episode of the Stripped Whole podcast. Hello to all of those of you who are watching on YouTube. I'm so enjoying all the comments and feedback that you guys are sending in. So today we are here with another episode and another thought, another challenge, and hopefully another perspective. I'm still here. I don't know if you can still remember our Hebrew lesson from last week, but I'm still here in bidud, isolation, and I'm on day 43 now, and probably by the time you guys hear this, it'll be more like day 50 something. Homeschooling is definitely not for the faint-hearted, and it's difficult, it's hard, but I'm so determined to get everything that I can out of this season and not to allow it to dictate misery and despair into my life. I love that phrase from Anne of Green Gables, one of my favourite movies, when Anne is saying, oh, don't you ever just feel like you're in the depths of despair? And Marilla just says, no, I do not. Because to despair is to turn your back on God. And it's like, oh, stab to the stomach. Oh, truth bomb. Yes, exactly. And I think it's very easy to turn to those kinds of emotions in these kinds of circumstances that are just unprecedented. There is no way to prepare for this season, for this scenario, and I'm just really determined that I am not going to be beaten by it, and I'm going to grow through it. So today's episode is about opposites repel. Now, it's usually the other way around, right? We usually say opposites attract. And I think what I'm trying to talk about today is a little bit of a mind-bending, potentially, little journey that we're going to go on. So bear with me and let's see if we can unpack this a little bit more. So something that I talk about quite a lot in my online courses and coaching opportunity. So something that I talk about quite a lot in my online courses and coaching opportunities is this whole concept of the principles of the kingdom being always opposite to the principles of the world. And I think a really, really good way of kind of opening that up and talking about it a bit more is to simply say that we are trained to run towards things. We are very driven people often. We're running towards what we believe is expected of us or the right thing. And it's definitely shaped by culture and pressure and Instagram and all the different pressures there are from the outside. But we run towards things. And the same can be said for the things that we run away from. We run away, especially now in this generation, we run away from things that are difficult, things that we don't like, things that don't make us happy. We talked about happiness last time. Things that make us struggle or maybe difficult. We run away from difficulties. We don't run towards them. And something that I've learned through my walk and through my lifetime is that God often has asked me to run towards the very things that the world would tell me to run away from. And I've got a ton of examples of that in my life, and I might take some time today to share some of those with you. But I just want to reiterate today how this concept of opposites repelling is something that I've learned to be a real kingdom key for breakthrough, because we are so conditioned by the kingdom of the world. And the more I've dug into God and the more I've pushed into God and the more I've learned and traveled through valleys and mountaintops through my own life, the more I can tell you that this has been a uniting statement across every landscape I've traveled through, is that the principles of the world are opposite to those of the kingdom, and we cannot serve two masters. And I've learned that sometimes, actually, I think I probably say quite often, God asks me to run towards the very things that the world is trying to tell me to run away from. I think a really good example of that is this whole life I've had of writing books and creating music. It comes with, that whole world comes with a set of expectations. And it's not just music and books, it can be said about really anything in the creative world. We find our validation, our worth, and actually our definition of success through whether or not our art is seen, our books are read, our music is listened to, our, I don't know, whatever it is that you do, it basically needs to be validated by an outside opinion. Artwork isn't finished artwork until it's hung on a wall and seen by other people. But I think I've learned through my own journey that actually God's got something very different in mind for me. I've written books, I've created CDs, and I did have all of those expectations. And I think I wanted to just share today a little story about one time I was really, really in a very, very in turmoil, I think I would describe it. I was in a cafe and I was about to meet a friend, and I was so low and just felt so heavy because I just was like, what was the point? I have just poured my whole life out as an act of obedience. I did not want to write these books. I never in my life thought to myself, I want to write books one day. Never crossed my mind. God told me to do it. I did it. He asked me to put something very private out there as a public thing, and it was not easy to do that. And it's the same with the music. The books explain the stories behind the songs, and the songs were private processing moments through one of the most difficult seasons of my life. And yet God said, right, now make those public. It wasn't easy. It was like hanging my soul out on the washing line for everyone to see. And I did it, and nothing happened. And I think I had tricked myself into hoping for and believing in the outcome that the world was telling me I should get. I've written books. Surely God's definition, because you see, what I did was I laid the world's expectation and expected it of God. And surely when you've written a book, God's definition of success is platinum selling. Sorry, that's music lingo, isn't it? Best-selling, New York, whatever, Times bestseller, Amazon #1 spot. Surely that is how God is going to do this, because I have been a good, faithful servant and I've done my bit. So surely it means, ta-da, success, numbers, money, Amazon, I'm going to just sell out. And the same with the music. Surely it's going to be #1 on Apple. It's going to be, God can do it. God can breathe on it. God can make it fly. And I think I tricked myself into believing these things were going to happen. And then when they didn't, it was just the most soul-destroying disappointment. Really a deep, deep place for me to go and sit and wallow around in my self-pity for a substantial amount of time. And I was sat in this cafe with the weight of all of this on me. Like, I just did not understand what was going on. And my friend came in and I poured all this out to her, and I told her, what's the point in making books if no one's ever going to read them? And what's the point in making music if no one's ever going to hear it? And I went round and round and round, and I was so sad. And I think I even cried in the middle of the cafe. And she sat there and listened like a good friend. And then in the end, she said, do you really actually believe that? And I just thought to myself, no, actually, I don't. I actually don't believe the words that are coming out of my mouth, because I know that's not how God works. I know that success in God's eyes is not numbers or likes or, bestsellers. I know that. Success is obedience. If I've obeyed what He's asked me to do, then I have 100% succeeded. And I think that was a really good example to me of me running towards a place the world would tell me to run away from. I started to run towards the one person who was going to read the book, the one person who was responding to the music. And I began to invest in individual people. And I learned on that day that actually my mandate was not necessarily in that season to be a best-selling speaker, singer, traveling, whatever big stage person. Now, don't get me wrong. I carry that dream in my heart, and I've had small tastes of that life, and I really, really loved it. But I think that God needed me to understand that his call on my life was all about stopping for the one and loving them well. And that is a place the world tells you to run away from, because people are messy. Trust me. Oh my goodness. I have landed myself in some very uncomfortable positions with some very difficult people who I have stopped to love, and they have not loved me back. And that's okay. That's not the point. But the point I am trying to say is that I think one of the tests of whether we are willing to run towards that place the world tells us to run away from is our attitude towards it. Are we willing to flourish there, or are we going to end up barren and dry and empty and worn out and abandoned and essentially punished forever? I think a lot of us really do think that. We do actually, in the back of our minds, think that when we are in a desert season, we've been abandoned and God must be punishing us for something. And that's a different topic for a different day. But I love that God taught me in that season of understanding that success was obedience. He taught me that I was able to flourish in places that, again, the world will tell you that you'll die. Now, I want to tell you another story here. Once a year, I am part of a team that hosts a 10-day program here in Israel that is for anyone who wants to come and encounter God through worship in the land of Israel. And one of the places that we go to on this 10-day trip is the desert. If you're interested in coming along, you can look it up online. The link will be in the show notes. It's called Ascend Carmel, and you're really welcome, so invited to come and join us. But this place we go to in the desert is really off the beaten track. We take our people all kinds of places that tour groups would never go, because we're local and we know the land. So we take people to all these really special spots all over the country that you would never get on a regular tour. And this is one of them. We have this spot in the desert where we take our people and we give them an encounter with God in the wilderness at 7 a.m. in the morning. We leave them in the desert, surrounded by this arid, just barrenness. And we say to them, right, we set them up 10 minutes, little talk, get a word from God. And every single program we've run, that little half-hour, 45-minute time of alone time with God in the desert is repeatedly people's highlight of the entire program. Because let me tell you, God speaks in the desert places. My word, God speaks in the desert places. And I received one of my most poignant words from God when I was in the desert place on that very first program that we ran. And this is what happened to me. We went out, we were walking through, we found our little spots, and I was very busy taking care of everybody else, making sure everybody was okay. It's very rocky ground, it's not stable, so I was helping some of the older people trying to make their way across the rocks. And finally, when everybody was settled down, I went and found a spot for myself. And what I ended up finding was this little space. It was like a clearing on the ground, as if someone had just like swept the ground about half a meter, just circle of clear ground, and I just plunked myself down there. And I was just sitting there, and I was quite tired. It's quite a lot of work running this program, and I was just really tired. And I just sat there and I thought to myself, God, I'd love to hear from you right now. I would just love it. I'd really love it. And I just felt like God said to me, just take a look around you. So I started to really look at my immediate surroundings, and what I saw was that just in front of me was a board, like a stone border of a dirt track, like a pathway that someone had created. And I was just off it. And I was sitting between two gorgeous thistle bushes, like, really purple spiky actually very painful if you ever go near them, but look pretty, bushes. And they were absolutely covered in butterflies. And God just spoke to me so clearly in that moment. And He asked me to look up. And what I saw above me, just in front of me and on the horizons, were just these incredible, majestic mountains of the Judean mountains in the desert. It was just beautiful with the sun hitting them. They were really red. And behind me was the Dead Sea. So all those bitter waters were behind me. And God said to me, the bitter places are behind you, the heights are in front of you. And if you come with me off the beaten track, I will take you to places where you may be in the middle of the desert, but you'll be surrounded by transformation. And that was a word that just stuck with me for years, so deeply. For so long, I was absolutely blown away by this word. And it's something that we've seen over and over and over again on this program. People get their first song, they get a word from God, it changes the direction of their lives, and it brings transformation. That's really the whole point of the program. But for me, in that moment, it was a declaration of flourishing in that place where the world would tell me I would die. I should die. I'm in the desert. I'm surrounded by nothing. There's only salty waters. There's just gorse bushes. There's, insects and snakes, and I'm off the beaten track and all that kind of thing. All these are the negatives that can swirl around your head when you are dealing with that kind of desert season. But God just showed me a completely different perspective in that moment to the desert seasons in life. And I learned right there that my obedience to Him, A, comes with flourishing in unexpected places, but B, my obedience cannot come with conditions. And that was another really big thing that God has shown me over the years. Because, I mentioned a few minutes ago how I was in that cafe and the argument I was having with God about my right to having a successful book and my right to having successful CDs, and how it was not worth it unless the world's definition of success happened. And what I learned through that time, from that cafe all the way through these many months and years have passed since, what I've learned through that season is really just how I have actually at many times come before God and really held Him ransom. I've held Him captive, and I've said to Him, give me this because I'm entitled to it. And if you give me this, then I'll do that. And I've come to understand that that's actually really not the way that we interact with God. And I think a lot of us do it without realizing it. I had no idea I was doing this until God really convicted me and was like, what right do you have? You cannot come before me entitled. You're not entitled to anything, which I'm not. I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to a book that sells. I'm not entitled to music that sells. I'm not entitled to those things. If He chooses to give those to me, brilliant. Thank you. That's a gift and a bonus. But actually, all I am entitled to is serving Him. That is my place. That is my right. And that is my life mandate. And what I learned was how many conditions I was putting on my obedience. I would say things like, God, you've asked me to do this, but I'd really like some confirmation, or if you could just do X, Y, and Z, then I will do what you said. And that's not how it works, actually. In any way, you cannot strong arm God into doing what you want. And that's something I was very good at doing. And I realized I was doing it and was mortified and had to do a lot of backpedaling and apologizing and repenting and all those other things that are so fun to do. And I really had to come before God and say, you know what? Not your will, but mine. Whatever you want. Obedience is obedience. It can't come with a set of conditions and a set of requests that you want in exchange for your obedience. That's not what God is looking for. He's looking for someone who will obey no matter the cost. Someone who will obey wherever it takes them, whatever the cost. And I think that is such a hard-hitting truth, because it comes in all shapes and different realities for each person. You know, the cost of obedience, there's always a cost to obedience for everybody. And it may be that your obedience leads you exactly into these places we've talked about today. Maybe your obedience will lead you directly into a desert season. Maybe your obedience will lead you into a place where God's plan is to flourish you, but it might not look like it. Maybe your obedience is actually just about stopping the entitlement. You know, I think today's generation and life around us in this day and age has become so entitled. I'm so often saddened to hear the things my kids say that they've heard at school, or the things that I hear young millennial generation aged women that I mentor and take care of and disciple. You know, sometimes I have to really challenge them on that. You know, they're brought up so entitled that they are, I'm supposed to be happy, I'm supposed to be rich, I'm supposed to be successful, I'm supposed to be. And nowhere is that, where is that written? Where has God said that all millennials will be entitled? You know, where is that rule? It's not real. And I've had to really learn that for myself, but also it's something that I've developed into a challenge for people. Do we come before God willing to go to those places that the world will tell us to run away from? Are we willing to flourish even when the world will tell us you will die there? Are we willing to obey without conditions? And are we willing to obey blindly? Because blind obedience is the epitome of surrender. And surrender is also another topic for another day. But let me just tell you this little gem. Surrendered hearts are the most valuable thing that God can find on this planet. And I'll tell you why. Surrendered hearts do not steal glory from God. They only add and contribute to the glory that is already being given to him. And that is where surrender, if you're not in the equation, if you are not present in the equation, then all the glory goes where it belongs. And it cannot go where it belongs if you are entitling yourself to some of that glory and trying to steal a little bit for yourself. And I'm speaking to myself here just as much as anyone else. But that is why surrender is such a key to breakthrough, because it is a sign of obedience, and blind obedience. Whatever the cost, wherever it leads me, I will go. Even if it is a place that everyone's going to tell me I'll die, or everyone's going to tell me is a bad place and I should run away from it. You know, when my husband and I moved to Israel, coming up for 10 years ago now, that was exactly the kind of comments that we were receiving from some of our very good friends even, that it was going to be a place where we were not going to flourish, and it was going to be hard, and it was going to be tough, and it was, why would you want to go there? You should be running away from conflict, there's war, there's all kinds of things there. And, you know, we persisted and we came, and, you know, it was one of the most difficult journeys you could possibly imagine. It took years to get through to the end where we received the paperwork, and it took a massive amount of money, emotion, prayer, battling. It was an enormous battle, not just legally, also spiritually, for us to actually finally root ourselves in the place that God told us to come to. And it made no sense for us to stick it out in any way. Financially, it was ridiculous. Every way. And we had a lot of people along the way telling us, oh, just come home, just give up, and I tell you, being here and being away from family, especially in this season where we have no idea how long it's going to last, but being away is a great cost. It's a great cost, and it is painful. But I'm telling you this, and I hope it encourages you. He always, always blesses obedience. He always, always sees it, even when no one else does. And you can guarantee that when God sees it, That's all that matters. So I hope that you find some encouragement today in the season that you're in. Maybe you are making those difficult choices to go towards the things that the world would say to run away from. Maybe you are living exactly that opposite repelling concept where the kingdom is pulling against the world and you are running towards those places to flourish no matter what. I hope that you have found some hope in that concept and in that perspective, and that you will flourish wherever you are today. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on this Stripped Whole podcast. If you've liked what you've heard today, please leave a rating and a comment down below so that we can hear your feedback and do better next time. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode.